can mean that we know more than we normally do on a Wednesday leading up to the game. So we got a lot we're going to talk about. And of course, we always want to hear from you and what you want us to be talking about. So put your questions underneath the live video on Facebook for us to get a chance to answer those. I figured we'd start with the positive news. There was another award. We stacked up a whole bunch of defensive ones last week. This one is on the offensive side.
Yeah, Tom Brady, unsurprisingly, after throwing 5 touchdown passes and 369 yards and leading a 17-point comeback and all of that, he's the NFC Offensive Player of the Week after we had all those Defensive Player Awards last week. He has 31 of those now. Okay, not NFC. He has one NFC one, but he has 31 Offensive Player of the Week awards, which is incredible. It's the most by anybody. Again, not surprisingly. That's like 1.5 a season. I mean, you get excited when you get one, and this guy's been stacking them up multiple times per season in his career.
That's a pretty incredible award. And speaking of that, I know that he won that award missing some key people on Sunday, and that has continued to be a storyline this week. I feel like earlier in the season, the injury bug had hit a bunch of teams that, when we played the Broncos, we talked about that they were down so many people, and the Bucs had really been able to avoid that, at least in the first few weeks. And now it seems like kind of finally caught up with them, and at a very inopportune time when it's a short week. So what do we know at this point about some of the guys that are in, are out, and what this could mean, especially for this offense?
Yeah, you said we're closer to the game, so we know more, and we do. We know that all the guys that didn't practice the last 2 days, they were really just walkthroughs, but still they didn't walk through. So that's certainly not very encouraging. We won't know until later today exactly who is out, but it's a pretty scary picture. Your top 4 wideouts all have not practiced. That's Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Justin Watson, and Scotty Miller. And at the moment, what you have on the roster is ready to go is Jaden Mickens and Cyril Grayson, who was just promoted. And that's it. There's 2 guys on the practice squad, Josh Pearson and a new one. His last name is Whitney, that I am blanking on at the moment. But obviously, those guys don't have any experience whatsoever. They could be active or elevated for the game. That's another thing we'll find out later today. Here's the way I'll look at it. 3 different people, Bruce Arians and Todd Bowles, and then Levante David, all said one thing that was interesting this week after the comeback win. They all said they wouldn't have won that game last year. And Levante said the Bucs teams of pretty much his entire career wouldn't have won that game. And they found a way to win that game, and they have confidence, and, they figured it out, and they believed. I think they're going to have to do the same thing this week. If you want to get that win and get to 4-1 against a good Chicago team in Chicago, I still think there's a way they can find a way to win, even if all those guys are out and Leonard Fournette and LaShawn McCoy are out. It's just going to have to be power your way through this one, and then you have a long break before the next game, and hopefully you get a bunch of those guys back. So we'll see. It's not going to be easy, but like you said, nobody was crying for us when we played Denver and they had a bunch of injuries, and we played the Chargers and they had a bunch of injuries. I think this season is going to be a war of attrition, and it's just our turn to try to get through one.
That's true. And we had a few people ask a question along these lines, but Jameer had asked, should we look at free agents for another weapon with all of the injuries? And I wanted to also hear your thoughts on how the new protocols and everything with COVID this year does affect that kind of thing.
Yeah, we were talking about this after the game on Sunday when we started to see this injury picture unfold. And there really is no way, because it's a Thursday game, there really was no option. I mean, you could sign somebody, sure, for the future, but there was no way to get somebody ready in the building and ready by Thursday, because it's like a 72-hour period with the COVID testing protocol. So you had to start on Monday. I think maybe they could get them in the building by Wednesday, but by that point, you're pretty much done with your preparations. Couldn't really work them into the game plan at all. So that really wasn't an option for this week, which is what you said at the top, because it's a short week. It was particularly difficult. So we just have to power through it. Now, if any of these injuries prove to be more long-term, then yes, obviously you're going to have to start looking outside the building.
Okay. And we had a few questions in a row about Tristan Worfs. Esai had asked just how impressed we are with him. Richard had asked, what do you think it's going to take to get him some offensive rookie of the year consideration?
That's tough for an offensive lineman. I mean, you're always going to have quarterbacks out there. I mean, wouldn't you? Justin Herbert's going to get a lot more attention than an offensive tackle, particularly because when an offensive tackle is doing great, you're just not saying his name very much. It's the opposite of a lot of these other positions. So he could be the best offensive rookie in the field this year, but I think it would be very difficult for him to win that award. You never know, I suppose. But he is playing really phenomenally well. He's playing like he's a veteran. He's handled some incredible pass rushers. He did really well against Joey Bosa this past week. Bosa even said that. Bosa said after the game that this kid's going to be really good. You start to see some of these analytics sites, your Football Outsiders and Pro Football Focus and things like that are starting to give him a lot of love, and not just in terms of rookies, but in terms of just all offensive linemen. He's playing very, very well, and that's also the case for a couple other guys like Ali Marpet and Ryan Jensen. I mean, the offensive line had its best game last Sunday, but it doesn't look like it's a fluke. It looks like it's something that's sustainable, and we've been looking for this O-line to really come together for a while, put a lot of resources in it. I mean, think about all the first round pick, 2 second round picks, a big free agency acquisition, and a third round pick in the last 4 or 5 years to build this line. And now it's really starting to come together.
Okay. And Jermaine had asked about our tight ends, that he said, do you think if one of them emerges as a star, could you potentially see us getting rid of OJ or Cam?
One of who?
So I think what he's saying is, because we have had so many, we do have a lot of tight ends there. And then now with OJ being out, if some of these other guys step up in a big way, do you think that that is a position where maybe you trade somebody? I know that was a talk before the season potentially, but now with OJ being out, just how that affects the tight end group overall.
Well, we don't have a lot of tight ends anymore. We have 3 of them. Eau Claire's on IR, so I guess he could come back and then you'd have 4. But Eau Claire is not really the same type of tight end as OJ Howard. Tanner Hudson, if Tanner Hudson emerges as a star, would we get rid of OJ Howard? I mean, possibly, but that's really asking quite a bit. Rob Gronkowski, we already know what he is. Really, everybody was raving about what OJ had done and how much progress he had made, and it was really working out nicely. He was really more of the receiving threat than Gronk was in the first 4 games. And Cam Brate, we know what he is, and we all love Cam, and he's a great player. But as one of the coaches said yesterday, he's not the same tight end that OJ Howard is. So OJ Howard is your best bet to really get those downfield plays, work the seams, beat people, because he's more athletic. He's really athletic for the size that he is, and fast. And you don't get a lot of guys. That's why he's a first-round pick. You don't find a lot of guys like that. So considering how well it was working out, I would think they would be motivated to keep OJ Howard around moving forward. And we don't know how long Rob Gronkowski wants to play yet either. So I feel like the tight end depth isn't really quite as incredible as that question seems to posit.
Okay. Daniel had asked, do you think this is going to be primarily a defensive game on Thursday?
Yeah, absolutely. That's the way I've been writing about it all week. The Bears have a very good defense, really good pass rushers in Akeem Hicks and Khalil Mack and Robert Quinn. Their inside linebackers, Roquan Smith and Danny Trevathan, are really good. It's a tough front seven. They've played very well defensively. The Buccaneers have also played very well defensively. I think both teams are in the top 10, but by some other metrics consider the Buccaneers defense one of the top 1 or 2 in the league. Considering how we are so banged up on offense and have to probably jury rig a game plan, and the Bears have had their change at quarterback and are still trying to really get their offense in a groove, whichever defense makes the bigger plays is probably going to win this game.
And Shanisha asked, Shanisha asked, were you surprised that Vaughn's number got called in the situation it did for his touchdown in that game?
Not as surprised as I would normally be, given that we were down to 2 running backs at the time. So it was either Ronald Jones or him. And I think we were clearly I think that came out of a shotgun. I think we were clearly in a passing situation. It wasn't 3rd down, it was 2nd down, but it was 2nd and goal from the 9, I think. And I feel like we were definitely going to throw, and Keyshawn had already shown that he could, serve as like a 3rd down type back. And you saw how well he made that catch. I mean, that was not an easy catch. And Rojo in that game had a couple balls he couldn't hang on to. So it wasn't terribly surprising in the moment that he was in there for that type of situation. Now, if you asked me that at the start of the game, I would definitely said yes.
And we had a lot of people asking about Tyler Johnson, what we've seen from him, how big of a role he's prepared to play. We've seen him at least get in for a couple games now, but hasn't had his number called too much. So do you feel like this could be the game that he really, kind of shows and proves, why they drafted him?
Well, hopefully it will be, because that we may not have another option. He may be your number 1 guy going into that game. Yeah, I mean, the Bucs felt like they got a steal when they got him in the 5th round, and there was just so much wide receiver depth in this draft that allowed that to happen. I think he would have gone higher in some other drafts. Yeah, and he's a talented guy, and he was just really, really set back by his injury in training camp, and there was no role for him in the offense when the season started. So, and then once you get started with the season, your primary concern is getting ready for the next game, not, is getting this rookie ready who's not part of the game plan. So it was probably hard for him to advance, but Coach Arians says he has advanced and he's ready for it. It's not too big for him now. So he's a talented guy, and hopefully he'll make the most of his shot here, just like Keyshawn did in the last game.
Okay, well, that's going to do it for us on this edition of Buccaneers Insider Live presented by Miller Lite. Thanks to all of you guys for tuning in. Thanks for those amazing questions. And we'll be back here next Wednesday, hopefully talking about a great game that we got to see in Chicago. So we'll see you then.